Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Israeli forces have captured Gaza's border with Egypt. Will this trigger a new showdown? Iran's leader Khamenei has reached out to protesting American students. He's praising them and asking them to read the Quran. We'll tell you why. Meanwhile, NATO is worried about its eastern flank. Apparently, it has only 5% of the capability to protect it from a Russian airstrike. On the other side, the Russian economy is going strong despite Western sanctions, and Western businesses have made a U-turn. They're not leaving Russia anymore. In India, the debate over Delhi's record high temperature continues. Did it really cross 52 degrees? The Weather Department is investigating. In Africa, 435 tons of gold were smuggled in 1 year. A new report shows how rampant this practice is. Nigeria has got a new old national anthem. Why is it being criticized, and what is President Tinubu trying to do here? India celebrates the win of chess prodigy Pragnananda. India has more grandmasters than ever before. We'll tell you why. Who invented butter chicken? The legal battle refuses to end. We'll discuss global food wars. Can artificial intelligence cure loneliness? Why are people getting married to bots? And why do adults dream about school exams, like not knowing the answers or reaching late or being lost? We'll tell you what science says about this. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Look who's preaching peace. China calls for a peace conference to end the Israel-Hamas war. Beijing is hosting several Arab leaders this week. China is positioning itself as a mediator in the Gaza conflict. In India, campaigning ends for the 7th and last phase of the general election. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Kanyakumari. He will meditate for nearly 2 days. The final phase of voting is on Saturday. The election results will be announced on the 4th of June. Election campaigning ends in Mexico as well, but violence mars the last day with several candidates being attacked. At least 50 candidates have died since October. On Sunday, nearly 100 million people will vote to choose Mexico's new president. The Spanish parliament passes a contentious amnesty bill for Catalan separatists. In 2017, there was a failed independence bid. The controversial bill annuls the legal records of those involved in it. It was a demand by separatist parties who helped the Spanish Prime Minister remain in office. Senegal's new president, on his first visit to junta-ruled Mali and Burkina Faso, he wants to strengthen ties with the two states who have quit the regional bloc ECOWAS. In April, the Senegalese leader became Africa's youngest elected president. And French pharmacists on their first strike in a decade. They're protesting over drug shortages, low prices, and the threat from medicines being sold online. In the last 10 years, around 2,000 pharmacies have gone out of business across France. Our focus remains on Rafah, probably the most dangerous place on earth right now. If the famine doesn't get you, Israel will. If Israel doesn't get you, the lack of aid will. There is simply no escaping it. And Israel is not slowing down. They've taken total control of Gaza's land border. Let me show you the map. Gaza borders two countries, Israel and Egypt. The Egypt border has a demilitarized buffer zone. It is called the Philadelphia Corridor. A demilitarized buffer zone. It's around 300 feet wide, and Israel has taken control of it. The question is why? This is what Israel's army says.
The Philadelphia Corridor served as Hamas's pipeline through which Hamas engaged in smuggling in Gaza Strip on a regular basis.
So that's why Israel says Hamas is using this corridor mainly to smuggle weapons. But Egypt has denied this. They say that there were no tunnels between Gaza and Egypt. And this will complicate matters because Egypt and Israel signed a peace deal back in 1979. They agreed on a crucial point here, that the border will remain demilitarized, meaning few or no soldiers will be deployed here. But Israel is risking that peace. They have put tanks and soldiers in the Philadelphia corridor. So will Egypt respond in kind, or do they have patience left? That is the big question at the moment. Meanwhile, in Rafah, the attacks continue. Israel is pursuing two strategies. The first is airstrikes. The second is street fighting. On Wednesday, around 50 strikes were reported in Gaza. Many of them were on Rafah. Israeli aircraft swooped in. They dropped the payload and flew off. Take a look at this. Israel's goal is to eliminate the Hamas, but most of their fighters are inside Rafah's tunnels. So how do these strikes help? Well, that's the thing. The strikes are not just meant for Hamas. They're meant to scare Rafah residents too, to make them flee. Just consider the airstrike on Sunday, the one that killed 45 Palestinian civilians. That strike led to an exodus of Gazans. Now look at the difference in the satellite pictures. You can see the camps empty out.
The situation is scary. With all the shelling, the children are scared. We have no place left to stay.
So the strikes drive people out, which brings us to Israel's second strategy, street fighting. It's pretty intense stuff. Israeli tanks and soldiers have reached central Rafah. They're fighting with Hamas operatives. But how long will this continue? Israel's national security advisor gave a grim timeline. He says another 7 months. That's how long it will continue. That's the whole of 2024. Another 7 months. Now, this timeline raises several questions. Number one, what kind of casualties are we looking at? The war in Gaza has been on for almost 8 months already. It has killed more than 36,000 people in this time. Now, add another 7 months to it. How many more people will die? And question number two, why will it take 7 months? Rafah is the only city still standing. Netanyahu himself called it the last phase of the war. Why would this last phase take 7 more months? And what comes after that? Will it be a civilian alternative to Hamas or an Israeli military occupation? Prime Minister Netanyahu is yet to answer any of these questions. His officials are basically winging the war. The US is not too happy about this. Apparently, that's where Washington draws the line. Bombing refugees, no problem. Post-war plan, big problem. But others are sharper in their criticism, like Turkish President Erdogan. He's calling Netanyahu a blood-sucking vampire.
And I think this underscores the imperative of having a plan for the day after. Because in the absence of a plan for the day after, there won't be a day after. And this is where we need to go, and we need to get as quickly as possible.
The world is watching the barbarism of a sick man, a maniac, a psychopath, and a blood-feeding vampire called Netanyahu, and they are watching it on live broadcasts.
India too has expressed concern. Remember, New Delhi was among the first to condemn Hamas, but Netanyahu's war has forced a rethink. India has reiterated its recognition for the Palestinian state. It has also expressed concern about the airstrikes on Rafah. Listen to this.
The heartbreaking loss of civilian lives in the displacement camp in Rafah is a matter of deep concern for us. We have consistently called for protection of civilian population, that these European countries have now come up and recognized Palestine as to how we look at it. Let me tell you that, India recognized Palestine way back in the 1980s.
Street protests also continue. The US city of Chicago saw major demonstrations. Hundreds of people protested Israel's war. They called for a ceasefire in Gaza. And guess who's advising these protesters? Iran's supreme leader. Talk about an unexpected crossover. The Ayatollah has written a letter to American protesters, especially to those in college. Listen to what he wrote. You are standing on the right side of history. You have now formed a branch of the resistance front and have begun an honorable struggle. My advice to you is to become familiar with the Quran. You can imagine the response. American politicians have slammed the Ayatollah. They've also sent a message to the college protesters. If Iran's supreme leader is supporting you, you are probably wrong. And it's hard to argue with that. Also, I wonder where this advice was for Iran's anti-hijab protesters. They got tear gas and jail cells. I guess that wasn't a resistance front. But all this pressure does matter because that's the only way to stop the war. As long as holdouts remain, Israel will push on. And right now, that holdout is the United States of America. A ceasefire resolution will soon be tabled at the United Nations Security Council. Guess who is opposing it? The United States. So Israel's isolation is not complete, and that is Netanyahu's signal to go on.
Представители стран НАТО, особенно в Европе, особенно в малых странах, они должны вообще отдавать себе отчет.
Europe is worried about its security. The skies over Eastern Europe are exposed. They have virtually no air defense. And this is a security assessment by NATO. Here's what their latest report says. Its focus is on NATO's capabilities to protect its eastern flank. Now, these are countries in Central and Eastern Europe. That is NATO's eastern flank. The report says NATO has less than 5% of the capability that it needs. Less than 5%. What are we talking about here? What kind of capability? Defense systems, rockets, troops. Whatever Europe needs to protect itself from an airstrike, they don't have it. The region is woefully under-equipped. In fact, let me quote from what a NATO diplomat said. Air defense is one of the biggest holes we have. We cannot deny it. Since the war in Ukraine broke out, NATO has not been able to do very much about it. It hasn't been able to boost its security in Eastern Europe. Just one American Patriot system has been deployed, and this is in southern Poland. It protects an airport. It's an important hub for the West. This airport in southern Poland is used to send Western military aid to Ukraine. And the bloc is also under pressure from Kiev, from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He's been asking for more air defense systems.
GS has already used more than 9,000 guided aerial bombs against Ukraine. And we need the ability to shoot down their combat aircraft so that they do not approach our positions and borders. It is possible. It is just as possible as giving protection to the cities of Ukraine from Russian rockets. We urgently need Patriot systems and missiles for them. This is what can and should save lives right now.
Clearly, Europe needs more air defense systems. So what are they doing about it? Talking for now. Hectic deliberations are on. Plans are being discussed. This week, NATO leaders are meeting in Prague. Later in July, there are plans for a summit in Washington, D.C. Both discussions will center around Europe's air defenses and how to improve them. NATO and Europe need to step up because the Russian president is pressing on their vulnerability.
The representatives of countries that are NATO members, particularly in Europe, particularly in small countries, should be aware of what they are playing with. They should remember that these are primarily countries with small territory and dense population.
Putin said that 2 days ago. He was referring to the statements from Macron and Scholz, the leaders of France and Germany. They said Ukraine should strike deep inside Russia, France and Germany. In response, Putin highlighted Europe's greatest weakness right now, the eastern flank of NATO. And he was referring to the same region that we just spoke about. Apparently, some of his advisors want him to go a step further. They want the Russian military to, quote-unquote, demonstrate its nuclear power in Ukraine. Does that mean a nuclear attack? Well, Putin's advisors did not spell it out, but they do want him to consider, and I'm quoting again, a demonstrative strike, something that can send a message to the West. So Brussels has been cautioned. Europe is in Russia's sights. If Moscow decides to strike, how will Europe protect itself? This is where Europe's internal rifts begin to surface. The bloc cannot agree on a single strategy. So far, their approach has been fragmented. Germany is pushing for the Sky Shield initiative. It was launched last year. The plan is to develop a shared air defense system using American and Israeli technology. More than a dozen countries have signed up for the Sky Shield. But France has taken a different path. They, along with Italy, have developed a system called Mamba. Then we have Ursula von der Leyen, who is going in a third direction. She is the European Commission's president. She wants an EU-funded air defense shield, and Poland and Greece support her. So there are three different plans, three different approaches being proposed to achieve the same goal, securing Europe's skies. But none will deliver unless Europe can tide over its divisions. And it's not like they've not tried, but the outcome has not been favorable. The longer they remain at odds, the more they strengthen Putin's hand and expose themselves to potential threats. Speaking of divisions, it's not just limited to Western countries. I could say the same about Western companies. Remember what they said in 2022? We will leave Russia. We will not support Putin's invasion. That's what Western companies said in 2022. Well, it's 2024, and guess what? Most of them are still operating in Russia. A new report has the numbers. Less than 400 companies have exited Russia, around 1,200 scaled back operations, and more than 2,000 companies still remain. So much for boycotting the Russian economy. Out of these, three names stand out. Avon Products, which is a cosmetics company, Air Liquide, the French gas company, and Recep, a UK consumer group. All three of them promised to leave Russia after the war broke out, but none of them have. I have more examples for you. Pepsi stopped its Russia operations in March 2022, but they still run a dairy business. It employs around 20,000 people. Same with Coca-Cola. Their drinks are made with a special syrup. After 2022, they stopped sending that syrup to Russia. So another company stepped up. Coca-Cola Hellenic. And guess who owns a 21% stake in that company? The parent MNC, Coca-Cola. So long story short, no one wants to leave. All their moral outrage has been shelved. The question is why? Because Russia made some shrewd moves. For starters, they imposed a sort of exit tax, a tax for companies wanting to wind up. It was around 15% of the sale amount. Another move was creating a 50% discount on asset sales. Let me explain that. Suppose you're a Western company in Russia. You have buildings or factories there. You have assets there. But after the invasion, you wanted to leave. So naturally, you will need buyers. If they are Russian buyers, you can only sell them at a discount, and that discount is 50%. So your asset value just halved. Would you like to take a loss in revenue like that? Or would you continue operations in Russia? Well, that was the question that they faced, and if money is on your mind, you would choose option 2, continue your operations. And that's what most Western firms have done. But forget the companies, let's look at Russia's economy as well, as a whole. There are more than 14,000 sanctions on Russia. They were supposed to cripple the economy, but the opposite is happening. Russia is projected to grow by 3.2% this year. That's faster than France, Germany, Britain, and the US. Again, the question is how? What explains this resilience? Broadly, 3 factors. Number 1, Russia's energy sales. The West may have stopped buying gas and oil, but India and China have stepped up. In April, Russia's energy revenue was $14 billion. It nearly doubled from last year, $14 billion. What's more, the West has not touched this trade. You can buy Russian oil without violating Western sanctions. Reason number 2 why they're thriving is wartime spending. The fighting can indirectly drain your resources, but it also helps some industries, like those making fighter jets or bullets or radar equipment, or even army uniforms or food packets. Russia is expected to spend $140 billion on defense this year. That's 7.1% of their GDP. In fact, military spending makes up 35% of all government spending. And finally, reason number 3, preparation. It started in 2014. Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine's Crimea. The West responded with sanctions. And since then, he's been on a mission to make Russia sanctions-proof. Just look at foreign exchange reserves. Russia has around $631 billion in the bank. That's about the same as India. But don't forget, Russia's population is just 1/10 of India's. Such huge reserves keep their currency stable. Putin has also worked to de-dollarize. His biggest trading partner is China, but 90% of that trade happens in local currencies, the yuan and the ruble, which is why Putin is sitting comfortably. But the West did the exact opposite. They were gorging on Russian oil and gas. They never had a plan B. Putin probably had a plan B, C, and D. So the moral of the story is quite clear. Sanctions are not a silver bullet. You can beat them with proper preparation. Also, their effectiveness depends on one major factor: how many countries are imposing them. If it's just one group, like the West in this case, then good luck, it won't work. But if it is imposed globally, you may have a better chance. Now let's talk about the heat wave. Every day the temperature is rising, the summer sun is unbearable. Yesterday, this extreme heat sparked a debate. Did the temperature in Delhi really cross 52 degrees Celsius? Because that's what reports said, 52 degrees. That Delhi had reported India's highest ever temperature, the highest on record, more than 52 degrees Celsius. That's around 127 degrees Fahrenheit. The news spread like fire. But now the weather department has clarified. It says the reading was inaccurate. So what happened here? Let me explain. There are 20 weather stations in Delhi. One of them is Mungeshpur. Now this is in northwest Delhi, and the reading came from here. Mungeshpur reported a temperature of 52.9 degrees Celsius, which is a record high, not just for the national capital, but for the whole country. The previous record for Delhi was 49.2 degrees Celsius, or 120 degrees Fahrenheit. It was lodged in 2022. Yesterday's reading was well above that, 52.9. So the weather officials rushed to Mungeshpur. They checked the readings again, and they found an inaccuracy. Later in the day, they issued a statement. The 52.9 degree reading was withdrawn. It's still not clear how they got it wrong in the first place. The statement suggested 2 possible reasons: an error with the sensor or local factors. It could be either of the two. They did not bother to specify, but they did share an updated set of readings. They gave a range of the temperature, the maximum temperature, in and around Delhi. Yesterday, it was between 45.2 degrees and 49.1 degrees Celsius. So it wasn't a record, just shy of the 2022 reading. And that comes as a relief, although it's only psychological, the relief, because the readings are just a technicality. The heat does feel unbearable. India's capital is experiencing an extreme heat wave. There are no two ways about it. And what is a heat wave? When the maximum temperature exceeds 45 degrees, that's the threshold, 45 degrees. That's a heat wave. And Delhi crossed it a while ago. It is raining fire every day, and it's leading to multiple problems, compounded by power cuts and water shortages. The heat wave is even sparking fires. Yesterday, the Delhi Fire Department received the maximum number of phone calls. They got a total of 220 calls, out of which 183 were fire-related incidents. Today, New Delhi also reported its first death due to the heat wave. It was a laborer. And it's not just Delhi. There's extreme heat across India. Today, the Met Department has issued fresh alerts covering 4 states, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. It said these states could experience a severe heat wave. So it's become a game of adjectives now, extreme, severe. The heat wave is also triggering forest fires. Today, there was one in Jammu. Thankfully, it was contained quickly, but forest fires used to be a rare phenomenon in India. You hear about them in countries like Russia, Canada, Australia, and the US, but India too is reporting the same now. The frequency is alarming, in fact. This year, the northern state of Himachal Pradesh reported more than 1,000 forest fires. The reason? Heat waves. And experts fear they could get worse in the coming years.
Well, of course, we know that heat waves have always happened and will always occur, also in the future. But what we also see is that heat waves all around the globe are becoming hotter, more intense, and also more frequent due to climate change. For instance, the heat wave across Asia in April and May, or in the Sahel, and also south of the Sahel, have been really intense and have been made a lot more intense due to climate change.
So India needs to brace itself for more extreme weather. As for the current heat wave, the weather officials predict some relief over the weekend. We hope their prediction is right this time. Now let's talk about a new study, a study on gold smuggling from Africa. It was released earlier today. It says that in 2022, at least 435 tons of gold were smuggled out of Africa. 435 tons. That's more than 1 ton of gold every day. Do you know how much 435 tons of gold are worth? About $31 billion at today's rates. It's enough to wipe out the national debt of some of these African countries, but that much gold was illegally smuggled out of the continent in 2022. And this has been a growing trend. The amount of gold smuggled out of Africa doubled between 2012 and 2022. And where was it smuggled to? Reports say that the lion's share of the gold, about 47% of it, made its way to the United Arab Emirates, where it was reprocessed, rebranded, and reintroduced into the global gold supply. Our next report has the details.
In 2022, the UAE was the world's third largest exporter of gold. The country exported gold worth $32.8 billion. All this without a single gold mine in the Emirati territory. So how did they export so much? Well, because they imported a lot more. Officially, $57.1 billion worth of gold. So it's a massive operation, where gold worth billions is imported, processed, and then exported. The operation is so big that tracing some smuggled gold in that mix would be almost impossible. But the group called Swissaid has done just that. They went through the numbers, and made an astonishing claim that the UAE has been buying gold smuggled from Africa. So how does this work? The gold is smuggled. It gets refined and then the UAE exports it in Emirati packaging. The global gold market doesn't care about where the gold is from as far as importers are concerned. The gold has become Emirati. Its backstory is of no interest to the market. In 2022, about 435 tons of gold were smuggled out of Africa. That is gold worth about $35 billion today. Smuggled gold means no taxes or tariffs, so it doesn't benefit the African nation's development. Most of the smuggled gold came from artisanal mining, where people mine the gold instead of corporations. Now you could think artisanal mining sounds like a good thing. A way for the average person to benefit from a nation's resources. But it's not that ideal. These are small-scale, unregulated mines prone to accidents and deaths, and you also have artisanal mines operated by militant groups. They enslave innocents, force them to work in the artisanal gold mines. Then they sell the gold to buy weapons, and use those weapons to perpetuate the vicious cycle. This is prevalent in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the war-torn East, where numerous groups vie for control. It's also common in Sudan, the country currently being torn apart by civil war. One of the warring factions is a paramilitary group known as the Rapid Support Forces. For all intents and purposes, the RSF is a private army, controlled by this man, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemeti. How does Hemeti pay his private army? With the proceeds from the gold mines he controls. All this gold could have been used to fuel Africa's growth, help the world's youngest continent progress. But instead, it is getting smuggled away. The common people aren't benefiting from Africa's vast resources. They are being used by warlords and militant groups to fund their own agendas. Africa deserves better.
Our next story is also from Africa. It's about Nigeria, the fourth largest economy on the continent. Yesterday was a momentous occasion. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu celebrated 1 year in office. Well, that is not the momentous part, though. It's how he chose to celebrate that raised eyebrows. Yesterday, Tinubu changed Nigeria's national anthem. Or he changed it back to the original, depending on how you want to look at things. Nigeria gained independence from the British in 1960. At the time, they had a contest to decide the new national anthem, and the winner was Nigeria, We Hail Thee. It became the country's first anthem, but there was a small problem with it. The song was actually written by a British expatriate. So Nigeria's first anthem was created by a colonizer, which does seem a bit odd, but they kept it anyway for 18 years. After that, the anthem was changed to Arise, O Compatriots. This change happened during a military dictatorship. So the second anthem was questioned as well, but it managed to survive the scrutiny for about 46 years, until yesterday, when Tinubu and his government dropped it and brought back the colonizer's creation. Look at the timing now. The change coincides with Tinubu's first anniversary as president. Maybe he thought it was the best time to regress, or perhaps he needed a talking point, something controversial enough to distract the public. And if that was his plan, he seems to have succeeded. Some opposition politicians are outraged. This is Nigeria's former education minister. She criticized the inclusion of terms like native land and tribe. She feels they are pejoratives in 21st century Nigeria. A former senator put this up to highlight the government's misplaced priorities. He says, "We have a bacterial infection, but we opted for Prada fragrance instead of penicillin." Strong words. He said that Nigeria needs to focus on its economic and security issues. We highlighted a major security breach a few days ago when more than 150 people were abducted from a village in Nigeria. The kidnappers hit the same village twice in 2 days, and the authorities did nothing to prevent that. That's the sort of security issue that plagues the country. Earlier this year, about 300 school children were kidnapped in northwest Nigeria. The northern part of the country is home to terror groups like Boko Haram and also bandit gangs who kidnap people for ransom. Tinubu swore to protect the country if he was elected. But 1 year into his presidency, the mass kidnappings continue. The president says he's doing the best that he can. His defense minister says that more than 9,000 terrorists and bandits were killed over the last year, but that has not stopped the kidnappings and killings. On average, more than 20 people are kidnapped in Nigeria every day, but Tinubu doesn't want to talk about that. So a new anthem seems like a good way to distract people. Then there's the other big problem, Nigeria's faltering economy. The last year has been tough on the people. They've suffered a cost of living crisis. Inflation has risen to around 34%, and again, the president must take some of the blame. The day he came to power, he announced an end to a fuel subsidy. The subsidy was draining money from the state coffers. Tinubu said it had to go for the greater good. But the sudden end of the subsidy caused an upheaval. Fuel prices rose sharply, followed by everything else. Meanwhile, Tinubu devalued Nigeria's currency, the naira. Its value crashed, so exports became expensive. Imports, rather, became expensive. Now, both these policies have hurt the common people and brought about economic turmoil. Another thing Tinubu would like the people to forget. So again, the anthem debate may help him turn attention away from the state of the economy and instead have them debating about which anthem has better lyrics. You see, a national anthem is an important part of a country's identity, so of course people will get emotional about it, but sometimes this passion can be used cynically to distract people from ground realities. We hope the people of Nigeria do not forget about the bigger picture. It was a big day in the world of chess. A young Indian prodigy beat a seasoned world #1. I'm talking about Praggnanandhaa. He beat Magnus Carlsen in a classical chess match, that too for the first time. It sums up where Indian chess is at, on the verge of a golden age. India now has more grandmasters than ever before. One of them is challenging for the world title. It's even sneaking into India's union budget. That's right, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman mentioned chess in her budget speech. But how did we reach this point? In 1988, India had just one grandmaster. Today, there are 84. What explains this sudden interest in chess? Our next report tells you.
You could sense the end was near. Magnus Carlsen had his hands on his chin. He was as fidgety as ever.
There will be another check, a second check from you.
Then, with a push of the chair, he did it. The world #1 in chess had resigned.
On G2, and there you go, Magnus Carlsen has resigned.
Across the table was Praggnanandhaa, an 18-year-old Indian chess prodigy. Most people would crack a smile after such a victory, but not Prag's. His style is more composed.
Youngest player in the field.
This is Prag's first win against Carlsen in classical chess. It's like test cricket for chess. The games are usually longer. You get around 1 hour to make your moves. This format is the real deal. But Prag's had never beaten Carlsen in this format, not until Wednesday. Both players were part of the Norway chess tournament. Carlsen tried a risky opening move, but it backfired. Prag's slowly took the advantage and forced Carlsen to resign. Any more details and you'll probably switch off. After all, the 64 squares are not as exciting as a cricket pitch or a boxing ring. But this story isn't about Prag's triumph. It's about the rise of Indian chess. The game originated right here in India. That was almost 1500 years ago. By the 20th century, Europeans dominated it. India got its first grandmaster only in 1988, the lightning kid Vishwanathan Anand. But he was a one-man army. In India, chess meant Anand and Anand meant chess. But not anymore. India now has 84 grandmasters, up from 20 in 2010. Only 2 countries have more grandmasters. That's Russia and the United States. It's the same with the rankings. Around a dozen Indians consistently rank in the top 100. One of them is Gukesh. The 18-year-old from Chennai is poised to make history. He won the candidates tournament last year. He's the youngest challenger for the World Chess Championship. Gukesh will take on Ding Liren of China. That match could end with a new Indian world champion. Makes you wonder, how is this happening? How is Indian chess suddenly growing? Well, it's not sudden. India has 50,000 registered chess players. Many states have included chess in the syllabus like Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. The Indian Chess Federation also deserves credit. They organize around 20 national events and the prize money is good too. It was around $264,000 in 2022. The federation is run mostly by former chess players, which means less politics. All of this has ushered in the golden age of chess in India. But let's not forget the lightning kid. Vishy Anand did play a key role here. He first became world champion in 2000, so young Indians grew up idolizing him. His triumphs gave Indians an important arsenal: self-belief. Former champion Garry Kasparov summed it up best. He said the children of Vishy Anand are on the loose. Yes, they are indeed. In any sport, success is the key to popularity, whether it was cricket in 1983 or chess in 2000. The question is, what should India do with this success? The answer is channel it. The first priority is to produce world champions, but grassroots problems remain, like parents' attitudes towards kids playing chess, or the lack of trainers or coaches, or even gender inequality. India may have 84 grandmasters, but only 3 of them are women. Now is the time to course correct to make sure the golden age is for everyone.
Do you know which is the most searched Indian dish globally? It's butter chicken, a dish that the world associates with India. Tender chicken cooked in thick tomato yogurt gravy with mild spices and loads of butter. What's not to like? A distinctive taste, subtle flavors, and enough spice to suit the global palate. This is what makes butter chicken unique. From the streets of Delhi to Michelin star restaurants, this dish is everywhere, even in courts, by the way, caught in a legal battle between two restaurant chains, Moti Mahal and Daryaganj. They're battling over who invented butter chicken, and now a fresh petition has been filed. We've discussed this case before. Tonight we'll tell you why it's generating so much buzz and how food wars are a global thing. At stake is cultural pride and money. In this particular case, it's around $240,000, which is almost 2 crore rupees, which makes it a pretty serious question. Who really invented butter chicken? The story begins in the 1930s. You could say it is as layered as butter chicken gravy. When India was still undivided, 3 men worked at an eatery in Peshawar. Kundan Lal Gujral, Kundan Lal Jaggi and Thakur Das. They worked at a restaurant called Moti Mahal. It specialized in tandoori cuisine. During partition, these men fled to India. Cooking was all they knew, so they opened a restaurant in Delhi's Daryaganj, and they called it Moti Mahal, an ode to their Peshawar restaurant. Soon, Moti Mahal became famous. The public loved it, as did world leaders. Now it's a restaurant chain with global franchisees. And what is their claim to fame? Butter chicken. Moti Mahal claims that Kundan Lal Gujral invented it. One day he had leftover tandoori chicken, he put it in a simple gravy with a lot of butter, and the result was butter chicken. But there's another claim. It says that Kundan Lal Jaggi invented butter chicken. He was once working at the eatery when a truck of refugees came in. They wanted food. So Jaggi whipped up a quick curry, and that became the famous butter chicken. Now, it's hard to verify which claim is true. But the trouble began in 2019 when Jaggi's grandson opened a different restaurant called Daryaganj. Its tagline said, "Inventors of butter chicken." So Moti Mahal went to court against it. Now, both are making the same claim that they invented the dish. First, the fight was over the trademark. Now, a fresh petition has been filed over the tagline, "Inventors of butter chicken." Moti Mahal says Daryaganj should remove it. But why is this tag important? Because it translates into money. The tag draws customers, it builds your brand, and people come for it. So both restaurants want it. Take champagne, for example. Technically, champagne is sparkling wine, but not all sparkling wine is champagne. Only the wine that comes from the Champagne region of France can be called champagne. And that is what makes it more expensive. People pay for originality. They pay for the tag of original creators. And this has led to many such disputes. In 2018, the Delhi High Court heard another such food fight over kebabs. 2 shops were vying for the name Tunde Kebabi, a famous kebab shop in the city of Lucknow. In 2016, there was a trademark battle over the name of Khan Chacha, a shop that is home to some of the best rolls in Delhi. Then there's the iconic Rasgulla, a syrup-soaked Indian dessert. 2 Indian states stake claim to it, West Bengal and Odisha. And such food battles are a global affair. Take hummus, for example, a dip made of chickpeas, tahini and other ingredients. It's a West Asian staple. Most countries in the region stake claim to it. From the Lebanese to the Syrians to the Turks, they all say they invented it. Israel says it was the food of biblical Jews. Same for jollof rice, a West African staple. Senegal, Nigeria and Ghana all claim to have invented the dish. In the East, it's kimchi, a fermented cabbage dish. It is a South Korean staple, but China claims kimchi is theirs, so much so that they made an international standard for it. Trust Beijing to do that. They go too far. But my point here is quite simple. Food is not just about taste and nourishment. It's also a powerful symbol of culture, identity and national pride. And that is what makes food battles so fierce. As for butter chicken, the world may not know who invented it, but that has not stopped them from enjoying it. Robots in Hollywood have quite a bad image. They either kill you, or steal your data, or leave you heartbroken. But what if that's not all? Can artificial intelligence become a companion? Can it cure loneliness? Research says it can. It can help humans deal with social isolation. It can prevent them from withdrawing from society. But there's a catch. As they say, too much of something is not good. And it holds true for companionship with AI. Our next report tells you.
Imagine this. You're sitting at home alone. You ask your AI assistant a question. It turns into a long conversation. You talk to it for hours. You feel good after that. If you think I'm narrating the script of some dystopian TV series, you're not wrong. Hollywood has long taught us two things. You will either fall in love with robots, or they'll try to kill you. But is there no other option, like companionship? Can artificial intelligence give you company? Can it cure loneliness? To understand that, let's look at loneliness first. It's a feeling of social isolation. It knows no age or gender or borders. Loneliness can affect anyone and everyone, so much so that the WHO calls it a global health threat. Apparently, it's as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And it is a global phenomenon. Across the globe, 1.2 billion people felt that they were lonely or very lonely in 2023. Around 10% of all adolescents are lonely. 25% of older people are lonely. In the UK, 7% of the population experiences loneliness. More than a third of Americans experience serious loneliness. So it's like a silent epidemic that's sweeping the world. Of course, the best solution is often talking to people. A friend, a therapist, anyone at all. But what happens when you can't? You can get a pet. Meaningful bonds like that always help. For children, it can be something as simple as a toy. Playing with it reduces loneliness. But what about artificial intelligence? Scientists believe that it can cure loneliness. The question is, how? Artificial intelligence can emerge as a valuable tool. You can practice conversation. You can have interactions. And all of this can help you avoid social isolation. Scientists believe that it could reduce the risk of people completely withdrawing from society. Of course, there is a downside. Relationships with machines are not as easy as they sound, and that's because of algorithms.
Yes, I can speak multiple languages, including English, French, German.
AI will often tell you what you want to hear, or even give wrong advice. Sometimes that can be fatal. Also, it could lead to lonely people seeking less human connections. It's already happening. People are getting virtual valentines. AI girlfriends are all the rage. A Spanish woman even married an AI-generated hologram. So the key here is balance. Having a human best friend to talk to is obviously the best cure for loneliness. There is no replacement for that. But in case you can't find someone to lend their ear,
hello there.
It's not a bad thing to turn to artificial intelligence.
First, ultra-realistic.
You're sitting in an exam hall. There's a question paper in front of you. In a cruel twist, you prepared for the wrong test. You don't know a single answer, so the horror sets in. The anxiety grows. But just as the hysteria reaches a crescendo, you wake up, sweaty and relieved. It was just a dream. The same horrifying dream yet again. Unless you're among the lucky few, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Dreams about exams. They're like monsters under your bed. And they take many forms. Like being late for a test or getting lost while finding the exam hall. No matter the shape they take, these dreams span generations. Even ancient Chinese had nightmares about the imperial exam, a civil service exam that decided people's fate. Even so, there is no way of knowing how common exam dreams are because not everyone remembers them. But research says they happen to almost everyone. They haunt students, they torment grown-ups. Even those who last took a test decades ago, dreamers of all ages are dragged back into the classroom. But why school and why exams? We have a lot of things going on, impending deadlines, important meetings, in some cases even unwashed laundry. So why do exams stand out in our dreams? To understand that, let's answer a basic question first. What are dreams? While we sleep, our brains are awake. They're building on our memories, solidifying the things that we learned and processing our emotions. Brains are hard at work and their work produces an output. We call it a dream. We dream 4 to 6 times in a night. And if you have exams coming up in real life, if they have been on your mind while you're awake, they will feature in your sleep. And if the dream is bizarre or anxiety-inducing, this is your brain's way of training you for the unexpected. That is what research says. But if you haven't seen the inside of a classroom in years, then the dream points to a challenge in real life. It's not about exams, really. It's about your real life challenges. It's about the feeling of being tested or the anxiety of not measuring up. You see, our brains categorize things, especially emotions. Similar emotions trigger similar dreams. For instance, a dream about driving a car with failed brakes is not about being a bad driver. It's about losing control of something. So when people come across difficult situations, when they feel that they're being tested, the brain reflects. But why does it jump to school exams and not, let's say, your first job interview? Because emotional memories are strong. Memories made during high-stress experiences are even stronger, and tests are some of the highest stressors. Plus, the more a memory is repeated, the stronger it gets. It stays with us. Meanwhile, our daily stressors are new. They don't have strong memory circuits. The brain cannot hook them into a dream. So instead of, if the brain panics about something in the now, it will go back to the old threatening memory of an exam. And that says a lot about how we feel about exams. But just because these dreams threaten you does not mean that they're all bad. In fact, research shows that they may be good for you. Students who dream of an exam are more likely to perform better. Science says that exam dreams are reassuring. They're a means for your brain to say, I know that there are things to do and I'm working on it. I am processing information. In simpler terms, scientists call it cognitive gain, which is said to be good for you. It is part of evolution. But if you would like to defy it and graduate from your dream school, then take the hint. Connect the events in your dream to the recent events in your life. Learn about what you're feeling and better prepare yourself in real life. But generally speaking, whether you forget the answers or show up in the wrong building, you don't need to overcorrect your dreams. After all, no matter what happens, you will always wake up. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Iceland evacuates the Blue Lagoon, its biggest tourist attraction after a volcanic eruption. In Pompeii, archaeologists discover 2,000-year-old children's drawing depicting gladiator fights. And the Madrid Zoo reveals a new giant panda couple. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1987, Goa became a state of the Indian Union. In the 1500s, it was conquered or colonized by the Portuguese. It remained under their control for 400 years. But in 1961, India launched an operation to retake Goa, and in 1987, it became a full-fledged state. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
Children, 6-year-old or 7-year-old children, as is evident both from the human figures drawn as cephalopods. In Naples, we concluded that these drawings of gladiators and to compare the two drawings. And we understand that here in Pompeii, even children directly from the head. Even today, small children draw.
cricket for billions around the world. And with the T20 Cricket World Cup here, emotions are definitely running high. This year holds particular significance for African nation Uganda as it prepares for its first ever Cricket World Cup starting on June 1st. The team, known as the Cricket Cranes, takes its name from Uganda's national bird. For the players, this is a dream realized. In a country where cricket takes a backseat to football, these athletes, adorned in vibrant red, are training relentlessly. Uganda's path to this World Cup has been challenging. The head cricket coach was appointed just a month ago. The Uganda Cricket Association enlisted former Indian cricketer Palki Sharma to lead and train the team. He affectionately refers to the Ugandan team as the infant of global cricket.
You have to be realistic with the young team. You know, it's a baby of the world, global cricket. So we have to understand that it's a baby of the team. And the baby cannot run with, Usain Bolt, right? So we have to be realistic.
Coach Sharma brings his vast international experience to the team, having coached top Indian players, the Indian women's cricket team and the Delhi Ranji Trophy team. He is focusing on enhancing both the skill set and the mindset of the players. Sharma believes the team is well prepared and expectations are high. The team is eager and in high spirits. While winning the tournament is a key goal, the experience and representation of their country is equally important.
If we can pick up a couple of wins at a World Cup, that would be a huge bonus for us. But more importantly for me is the platform the World Cup gives Uganda as a country. So it's important for us as ambassadors of the game to portray the country in a good light.
Some players hope this will pave the way for newer opportunities.
We're expecting very many things from the World Cup, mostly playing at your best and winning a few games, and probably getting picked to play in one of the franchise leagues.
Uganda's connection to cricket dates back to the 19th century. Introduced by British colonial settlers, Uganda played its first one-day international in 1975, participating as part of a combined East African team with Kenya, Tanzania and Zambia. The Cricket Cranes stand at the cusp of making history. This World Cup will be a springboard for future success and a testament to their determination and spirit.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden. How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. We know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all